What's going on, gangsters? Welcome to your 171st Android tutorial for the new Boston. What we're going to get into is actually start developing some kind of object that we can display within our OpenGl class here. And I know I told you guys we were going to develop a cube, but as for now, I don't want to jump into 3D. I just want to get the basic concepts. You know, developing a cube is so old school. It's like so square, you know. But I want to go into the basic concepts and just develop a triangle, 2D object, and then we'll get into the 3D since it's pretty much the same but a little bit different. And what I'm going to do is just kind of talk about some of the concepts using Blender here, which is a 3D modeling software, animation software, all that good stuff. And it's free, so if you guys are interested in that, I'd recommend Blender if you don't want to spend the money on like 3D Studio Max or anything like that. And as you can see here, we have a cube, which again we aren't developing. We're developing a square, or I'm sorry, we're developing a triangle. But with OpenGl, just some of the concepts that we can do is we can set the actual camera view. So if this like gray area here is our phone's device, we can say, hey, we want the camera to be closer to the object here, so you know our object appears larger. Or we can say we want our camera way back here, so our object's smaller. We can also scale the actual object itself, all that good stuff. So that's why we set up kind of the renderer class. That's going to handle some of those type properties that we're going to work with. But now let's just get into the basic concepts of 3D programming and what we're going to need to know. Again, here's just a cube, and we can rotate around it. But that's a 3D object. So as for now, we're just going to work with 2D, and I'm just going to switch to like the front view here. And the cube has 4 vertices. A vertice is just basically a point. Like a point here, a point here, a point here, and a point here, and then it's connected and filled and it's shaded, all that good stuff. What we're going to do is we're going to create a triangle, so we're only going to have 3 points. And how this works is we have an x-axis and a y-axis. The x-axis goes to the right is positive, to the left is negative. The y-axis is positive up and negative down. Which we'll get into a little bit later. But just for example, this point right here would be like -1 in the x direction, comma, +1 in the y direction. So that would be this point. So we're going to create some vertices in this tutorial in Eclipse. But you know, that's just how this is going to work. And again, just like for example, this point is 1 in the x direction and 1 in the y direction. Then we have 1 in the x direction, -1 in the y direction, etc. So let's just jump over to Eclipse. Hopefully you guys kind of understood what I was trying to explain there. And again, I told you guys we're going to create a triangle, so you need to set up a new class called GL Triangle Example, or EX. And probably all we're going to do in this tutorial is set up some of those vertices or some of those points that we're going to connect and fill in later. So how we're going to do this is we're going to create a float array. So we're just going to say private, because again, since we have this triangle class, everything's going to be, for the most part, private in here because we aren't going to allow other classes to change some of these vertices and stuff like that. So we're going to set these vertices to private, and it's going to be of the type float, and we're going to say vertices. And again, we just put those brackets to say that we're having a list or an array of some sort. Then we do our opening bracket, and let's define the points that we want to map out. And also we just are going to finish our statement here, and then we're going to define the points. So for example, we want our triangle to have a point of like here, here, and then right in the center up here. And we're going to have to remember some of these points. What we're going to do is we're going to start at this top point here and work our way around you know, clockwise like that. So let's develop our first vertice in Eclipse. And so again, the first, or the top part of the triangle, the x direction is going to be 0, and we're just going to say f for float. And the first, you know, the y direction is going to be a +1 because it's going up. So we're just going to say 1f as well. And then, you know, we can set up our next vertice here as well, or like, you know, 1 or whatever. But you know, it gets kind of confusing when you look back at your code and all that stuff. So what we're going to do is we're just going to hit enter and start a new line, so we know, hey, yeah, we're working with a 2D object with the x and the y direction, and that's our first point. So you can even leave a comment here like 0.1 or something like that, or actually this would be 0.0. because again, in computers you always start with 0, 1, 2, etc. And then we're going to create our second point, so that's going to be at the reference 1 in the x direction and comma -1 and in the y direction. And we can again leave a comment like point 1. For our last point, it was -1 in the x direction and -1 in the y direction as well. And we're just going to say 0.3. And also we have to, I'm sorry, I forgot to set this equal to what we want. So we're just going to set this equal to this bracket here. So yeah, so that's why we're getting those errors. Because again, when we define an instance of a class, we have to set it equal to something. So these are our 3 points again. And why did I put 0.3? Just messing up everywhere. And that's 0.2. So again, let's just look at these. Just a quick tutorial. Nothing too complicated, but again, just to understand these principles of 3D programming. Our first point is 0 in the x direction, so I'm going to try and show it in Blender here, and 1 in the y direction, so like right here will be our first point. And then the second point will be 1, -1, so it's going to be like 1 and then -1, which will be right here, same corner as that square for the most part. And then for third point, it's going to be -1 in the x direction, -1 in the y direction, so right here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to connect it and then fill it in and all that good stuff. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial, guys. Just a basic introduction to 3D programming, or actually I should say 2D programming at the moment. But there we go, and I'll catch you guys in the next tutorial. Have a good one.